A priest in white stands before a small altar. His face is covered. With silver tongs, he lays sandalwood on the flame. The flame, those who keep it say, has not gone out in over 1,000 years. This is the story of the empire that fell and the fire that did not. The first image, a man on horseback on a cliff in southern Persia in the year 224. He is receiving a ring from another rider on horseback. The other rider is the god Ahura Mazda. The stone is meant to outlast him. The second image, a man asleep in a watermill near the Murghab River in the year 651. His crown is in a sack beside him. He has been running for 10 years. He does not know that the miller is watching the sack through the open door. The third image, 7 small boats pulled up on a beach in Gujarat, sometime in the 8th century. A circle of priests in white stands around a sealed metal vessel. Inside the vessel, a fire that has not been allowed to go out. 427 years separate the first image from the second. The third is the second's improbable epilogue. This is the Sasanian Empire, not the Persia of Cyrus and Xerxes. That empire ended 1,000 years before this one began. This is the second great Persian Empire, the one that fought Rome to a draw for 4 centuries, the one that captured a Roman emperor alive, the one that made Aristotle live longer in Pahlavi than he did in Greek. The Sasanians built the most redundant memory machine of the ancient world, a state, an official religion, a hereditary priesthood, a canonical text, fire temples that were never to go out, imperial decrees cut into living rock. Every layer was backup for the others. In 3 generations, after the Arabs arrived in 633, every layer failed at the same time. How does an empire with everything lose everything in 80 years? Who carries the thread when the official machines all fail at once? And why is the only flame still burning, 13 centuries later, the one nobody in the empire would have predicted? This is the story of how the most prepared civilization in the ancient world lost everything it had prepared, and how a handful of people no one would have appointed carried what was left across an ocean, across 1,000 years, into the small white room where the fire is still being fed before dawn. A priest in white stands in a small room of white marble. He has been awake since the 3rd hour before dawn. He has bathed. He has dressed from head to ankle in unbleached linen. The padan, a white cloth mask, covers his mouth and nose, so that no breath of his can reach the flame at the center of the room. The fire stands chest high on an altar of stone. It rests on a bed of ash that has not been disturbed for longer than any living priest can remember. With silver tongs, he never touches the wood with his hands. He lifts a length of sandalwood 45 centimeters long from the pile to his right. He sets it on the flame. Beside the altar is a small bronze bell. He picks it up and rings it once. The sound carries through the marble and dies. He is performing the boy, the ritual of feeding. He will perform it 5 times today, once at the start of each ga, each watch of the day. The priests of this temple have performed it 5 times a day, every day, for as long as anyone in this community has been writing things down. This room holds an Atash Barum. The phrase means fire of victory. It is the highest grade of consecrated fire in the world, and there are only 9 of them. To consecrate one requires fire gathered from 16 separate sources. Among them, a fire kindled by lightning, a fire from a goldsmith's forge, a fire from a baker's oven, a fire from a corpse burning. Each source fire is purified through 91 separate rituals before it can be joined to the others. The full procedure takes nearly 15,000 hours of priestly work. The man holding the silver tongs this morning is the latest in a chain. The man who taught him stood here. The man who taught that man stood here. The priesthood is hereditary. 9 families have kept this fire alive for as long as any of their genealogies go back. He turns his face from the flame. Outside the marble room, he cannot see. The world is doing whatever it is doing this morning. Inside, the chain holds. A king in his early 40s is sitting on a horse, holding still, while the men below him cut his portrait into a cliff. The cliff is at Nakhche-Rajab in the south of the Iranian plateau. The year is around 226, 2 years after the battle in which he killed the last king of the Parthians and made himself master of the plateau. 3 sculptors are working on the relief at the same time. One is carving the horse's mane. One is carving the king's right hand. One is carving the figure facing him on a horse of the same size, the god Ahura Mazda. In a moment, captured forever in stone, the god is handing the king a ring of cloth and ribbons, the diadem of kingship, and the king is reaching out to take it. Ardashir does not look at the god. He looks at the diadem. He has been waiting for it for most of his life. The sound of 3 chisels on the same block has a rhythm to it. Each man strikes 3 times, pauses, strikes 3 more. The pauses are offset so that there is rarely silence. The summer heat by noon is brutal. The stone holds it like a furnace wall. Ardashir's father, Papak, was a minor king of a city called Istakhr, near the ruins of Persepolis, where the older Persia had ruled 700 years before. Ardashir spent his youth on stories of that older world. In 224, at Hormizd-Gan, he met the Parthian king Artabanus IV in open battle and killed him. Within 2 years, he had taken Ctesiphonta and proclaimed himself Shahanshah, King of Kings, of a new empire he understood as a restoration. Zoroastrianism would be the state religion. The Avesta would be its canonical text. The Mobeds, the hereditary priesthood, would be officers of the state. The fire temples would be funded from the treasury. Every fire consecrated in the new realm could trace its flame, the priests would say, back to a single fire that Ardashir lit himself. The stone is meant to outlast him. He understands this. It is why the relief is being cut. A boy of perhaps 16 is sitting cross-legged on a palm fiber mat in a small room with whitewashed walls. The room is in a priest's school in Istakhr around the year 280. The sun has just gone past the highest window. He has been here since the morning. Opposite him, on another mat, sits an older priest. There is no book between them, no tablet, no slate, no parchment. The older priest is reciting a long passage of Avestan, the sacred tongue, the one nobody has spoken in the street for centuries, and the boy is repeating it back, one verse at a time. When he misses a syllable, the older priest stops, says it again, and the boy starts the verse over. The boy's throat is dry. He has been swallowing without water for 2 hours. His tongue feels heavier with each verse. He is imitating not only the words, but the exact inflection of the older priest's voice, the way certain syllables drop in pitch, the way long vowels are held longer than in speech. The sound matters. The sound the priests teach is what makes the words holy. The Avesta has tens of thousands of verses. He will know all of them before he is allowed to perform A Boy unaccompanied. This is the system. The Avesta is not first a book. It is first a body of sound held inside the bodies of a hereditary class. The Mobeds are appointed by birth. Their sons inherit the priesthood. Their chief, the Mobedan Mobed, sits beside the King of Kings and speaks for the religion of the state. In this same generation, a Mobedan Mobed named Kartir does exactly that. He will outlast 5 kings and have his own inscription cut into stone, the first non-royal voice ever carved into Sasanian rock. The system has redundancy, perhaps 10,000 Mobeds across the empire. Each holds part of the Avesta in his head. If a few die, the others remember. If a province is invaded, another keeps the verses alive. The text is duplicated through the bodies of an entire class. It is impossible to imagine the entire class going at once, so the priests, for the moment, do not imagine it. A man is standing on a wooden platform tied to the face of a cliff. The cliff is at Nakshe Rostam, 10 miles from where Ardashir's investiture relief was cut 40 years ago. The man is a sculptor. He is around 40, with hands no longer steady on fine detail, but still good for blocking out a wrist. He is carving the right wrist of King Shapur I. The wrist holds, by its other end, the wrist of a man in a Roman tunic, a man kneeling on a smaller scale before the king's horse. The kneeling man is the Emperor Valerian, the first and only Roman emperor ever to be captured alive by a foreign enemy. The sculptor's left hand rests on the cold north face of the cliff, holding him steady. The cliff faces north, so the morning sun never reaches the relief. The stone is always cold, even in summer. The rhythm of his hammer is 3 light taps, a pause, 3 more. Fine, pale dust drifts up into his nose. The platform sways slightly when one of the other sculptors, 20 feet above him, shifts his weight. Above the platform, 4 older tombs are cut into the same cliff. Cyrus's heirs are buried there. Darius I, Xerxes I, Artaxerxes, Darius II, the kings of the older Persia, whose empire fell to Alexander 150 years before Rome ever heard of Persia. The new dynasty is carving its triumph directly beneath the tombs of the old. It says, "We are them returned." 10 years earlier, in 260, Shapur defeated 3 Roman armies. He killed Gordian III. He took 500,000 dinars in gold from Philip the Arab, and at Edessa he took Valerian alive. Shapur had a trilingual inscription cut into a small stone tower at the foot of this same cliff, in Pahlavi, in Parthian, in Greek, narrating the deed in his own voice. "We took Valerian Caesar with our own hands." The relief is meant to outlast the empire. So is the inscription. So is the stone. It is a reasonable bet. Stone does not burn. Stone does not rot. Stone cannot be confiscated. But stone needs readers. A man is sitting at a low table in a lamp-lit room in the city of Gundashapur in the year 555. He is Nestorian Christian, born in Edessa, fluent in Syriac, trained in Greek philosophy. 3 years ago, when the academy at Athens was closed by the Emperor Justinian, he left the Roman world. He took a ship east. He has been employed here ever since. 3 books are open on the table. One is in Greek, a copy of Aristotle's On the Soul. One is in Syriac, an earlier translation that bridges the two. One is a fresh tablet of Pahlavi on which he is writing. An olive oil lamp is burning at his elbow. He has stopped on a single word. The Greek word is psyche. He has been turning it over for 3 lamp trims, and he still does not know how to render it in Pahlavi. The Zoroastrian world has a word for the guardian spirit, Fravashi, but it is not quite the same. He writes a word, he scratches it out, he writes another. He is one translator among many, in one academy, in one city, at the height of an empire he was not born into. The king who pays him is Khosrow I, called Anushirvan, immortal soul. Khosrow has reformed the tax system, codified the law, doubled the standing army. He patronizes Indian mathematicians, Syrian doctors, Greek philosophers. While Justinian closes the academy at Athens, the philosophers walk east. For a generation, Aristotle lives better in a Persian language than in any Christian one. Khosrow I's grandson will undo all of it. Khosrow II will take Jerusalem in 614 and carry off the true cross to Ctesiphonte. By 628, he will have lost everything and been killed by his own son. The empire the translator is helping to build will be exhausted within 2 generations. The translator does not know this. He dips the reed, writes a word he is not sure of, and moves on. Pause for a moment. 400 years have passed since Ardashir sat on his horse and let the sculptors cut him into the cliff. The empire he founded has held. It has held against Rome, against Byzantium, against famine, plague, and civil war. It has codified its religion, copied its texts, sent its priests to every province, cut its history into stone in 3 languages. The Atash Bayrams are burning in every city. The Avesta is held in the bodies of 10,000 mobeds. By every measure the Sasanians would have used, the system is working. They have built more redundancy than any civilization before them. State, religion, priesthood, text, fire, stone. Each layer was meant to back up the others. They are wrong about one thing. They believe the layers are independent. In Medina, in the year 622, a man named Muhammad ibn Abdullah has just been driven from Mecca with his followers and has begun to gather a community. Within a decade, his successors will be on the Sasanian frontier with cavalry no one in Ctesiphonte has been monitoring. Watch the boy who will sit on the throne. We will meet him soon. A boy of 8 is sitting on a throne that is much too large for him. The throne is in Ctesiphonte, in the great vaulted hall of the Takhasra, beneath an arch of fired brick 100 feet high. The morning is bright. The boy's feet do not touch the floor. The robe they have put on him is dragging onto the marble. They have placed the imperial crown on his head, a crown of gold and lapis, weighing close to 3 kilograms, and it has slipped slightly. A servant standing behind him, out of sight of the assembled court, is holding it discreetly in place with one hand. Outside the hall, a dog is barking. No one moves to silence it. The boy's name is Yazdgerd. He is the 3rd of his name. He is the great-grandson of Khosrow II. In the 4 years between his great-grandfather's murder and this morning, 14 monarchs have sat on this throne. Most of them have died violently. Most of them were members of his family. The men standing before him have decided he will do. He is young enough to be controlled. He is old enough to ride and to be displayed. The empire needs a face on the coinage. They have given it one. What no one in this hall knows is that 8 days ago, in a town 1,000 miles to the south, an Arab merchant turned prophet named Muhammad died after a short illness. His successors are already in motion. The first Arab raid against a Sasanian border post will come within a year. The boy on the throne is not stupid. He has been raised in courts where one learns to read a room before one learns to read words. He looks at the men assembled in front of him, the generals, the mobeds, the great landowners, and he understands in some way he cannot yet put into words. that they are all waiting for him to grow up before something happens, and that none of them know whether he will have the time. The crown shifts again. The servant very carefully sets it straight. A general is sitting alone in a tent near a canal called Al-Qadisiyyah. It is past midnight in the middle of November, 636. A single oil lamp is burning on the table in front of him. A goatskin map is spread under his hand. Small painted stones mark the positions of the armies. His name is Rustam Farrukhzad. He is the supreme commander of the imperial army of the King of Kings. He is 56 years old. He has been at this map for 3 days. The tent is quiet. Outside, his horses make almost no sound. They have been trained for a lifetime not to. He can hear only the wind against the canvas. His armor stands on a wooden frame at the back of the tent. Chainmail, helmet, round shield. He is wearing only a linen shirt. He puts his right hand on the stone that represents the Arab infantry. He slides it 2 centimeters to the east. He sits back. He looks at the map. He has 60,000 men, perhaps more. Heavy cavalry, war elephants, archers, the full machinery of the Sasanian field army. He is facing perhaps half that number, under a commander he has never met, named Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. The Arabs have light cavalry, camel-mounted archers, and an intimate knowledge of desert ground. Rustam's army is built for open battle against Rome. It has never fought what is coming. Tomorrow, the fighting begins. It will last 3 days. On the 3rd day, Rustam will be killed in the press. The imperial army will be broken. The treasury the Arabs find in the Sasanian baggage will be the largest single haul of plunder in the history of the early caliphate. 6 years later, at a place called Nahavand in 642, the last Sasanian field army will meet the same fate. The Arabs will name it Fath al-Futuh, the victory of victories. After Nahavand, there will be no more imperial army. There will be only Yazdgerd III running. The general moves another stone. He sits back. He is unsure. He is right to be unsure. A man is lying on a pile of straw in a small watermill on the bank of the Murghab River near Merv in late autumn of the year 651. He is in his early 30s. His clothes are plain, a traveler's tunic, a wool cloak, cracked leather boots. There is no crown on his head. He is asleep. Beside him on the straw is a leather sack. The sack contains what is left of him, a gold crown set with garnets, the signet ring of his grandfather, a ceremonial sword, a small silver cup. He took the crown off his head before he lay down. He has not slept properly in weeks. Outside the mill, the water wheel turns. It makes a steady mechanical sound. The miller is standing in the half-open doorway. He is looking at the sack. Yazdgerd III has been running for 10 years. After Nahavand, he fled east, Isfahan, Kirman, Sistan, further east still. At each court, he asked for troops, for taxes, for an army. The local lords gave him a meal and watched him leave. He was the king of kings of nothing. He arrived in Merv a few weeks ago. The Marzban of the city, a man named Maho Suri, received him politely. Whether Maho sent the miller or whether the miller acted on his own, the sources disagree, and the sources are all later. Yazdgerd was alone in a mill on a riverbank with a sack of treasure beside him, and the door was open. Sometime before dawn, the crown rolls off the straw and onto the packed earth floor. At sunrise, the miller walks out of the mill with the sack in his hands. The river makes its sound. The wheel turns. The morning is cold. 427 years of unbroken dynastic succession end this way. Not in battle, not in a throne room, in a mill beside a river in a province nobody in Ctesiphonte had ever cared about. No mobed comes, no inscription is cut. The body is buried by the miller, somewhere the sources do not say, and the location is lost within a generation. The empire is over. The Atash Bayrams are still burning for a little while longer. A priest is alone in a small fire room in the city of Yazd at dawn in the year 720. He is in his 50s. The fire on the altar in front of him is smaller than it would have been 70 years ago. He is feeding it with tamarisk wood. The sandalwood is gone. The sandalwood has been gone for a long time. This is not an Atash Bayram. The fire that burns here is one of the lower grades, Atash Adaran, or perhaps Atash Dadga. The Atash Bayram of this city was extinguished 2 generations back when there were no longer enough mobeds to feed it. The priest has heard about it from his father, who heard about it from his. He is performing the boy alone. Before, it was done by 3 priests together. He picks up the bronze bell on the shelf and rings it. The sound carries through a room built for 20 people. There is no one else in it. The sound rings longer than it should. The cold air of the Iranian plateau comes in through the gaps in the walls. The smell of tamarisk burning is sharper than the smell of sandalwood. 70 years have passed since Yazdgerd III was killed in the mill. The caliphate, first Rashidun and now Umayyad, has settled into a working administration. Zoroastrians have been recognized as dhimmi, protected people of the contract, alongside Jews and Christians. They pay the jizya, they keep their fires, they do not build new temples. What is happening is slower than conquest. A landowner converts because his taxes go down. His sons grow up Muslim. A village mobed dies, and no one is trained to replace him. A fire temple, after the last priest, is locked, and within 2 generations, no one remembers what the room was for. The Atash Bayrams go out one by one, not in a decree, in separate mornings, in separate cities, over 200 years. The mobed in Yazd feeds his fire with tamarisk. He rings the bell into an empty room. He knows the chain might end with him. Far to the south, on the coast, another small group of his co-religionists is making other arrangements. A man is sitting at a table in a small room in the town of Tus in eastern Khorasan, late one afternoon in the year 1010. He is 70 years old. His beard is white. His hands have been writing for 33 years. The table is wood, dark, worn smooth at the corner where his elbow has rested. There is a copper inkwell. There is a reed pen, freshly cut. There is a sheet of paper, Oriental paper, brought across the Silk Road from China and sold in the markets of Nishapur. On the paper, he has just written the final couplet of the poem he has been working on since he was 37. The poem is in Persian, not Arabic, the language of administration, not Pahlavi, the language of the priests his great-grandfather knew, Persian, Parsi Yadari, the language emerging in the marketplaces of his time. He has worked for 3 decades to write almost entirely in Persian words, avoiding the Arabic borrowings that have filtered into educated speech. He has done this on purpose. He has done it because the language was disappearing into another language, and someone had to keep its bones. The poem is called the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. It is 50,000 couplets long. It begins with the creation of the world. It ends with the death of Yazdgerd III in a mill near Merv in the year 651, 359 years before this afternoon. The last 5,000 couplets are about the Sasanian fall, They are the only long account of that fall written from the Persian side, in a Persian language. Everything else is in Arabic, written by the victors. Ferdowsi was born to a family of Deccans, minor land-owning aristocracy, Zoroastrian a generation or two back, now nominally Muslim. He inherited a small estate. He used it. He spent it. By the time he wrote the last couplet, he was poor. He sets down the pen. Outside the single window, the sun is past the mountains. The room is silent in a way it has not been for 33 years. The closing couplet, in Dick Davis's translation, "I've reached the end of this great history, and all the land will fill with talk of me. I shall not die. These seeds I've sown will save my name and reputation from the grave." He dedicated the poem to Mahmud of Ghazni, the Turkish sultan who had taken Khorasan a few years earlier. By the tradition his community preserved, Mahmud sent silver in payment, where Ferdowsi had been promised gold, 1 gold dinar per couplet. By the same tradition, Ferdowsi refused the silver and returned it. He died around the year 1020 in poverty. The reward, the tradition says, arrived in Tus on the day of his funeral. His daughter sent it back. The poem he had bet 33 years on would, over the next 1,000 years, become the single most important text in the Persian language. Every Persian-speaking child, for a millennium, would learn its opening lines. He could not know this. He set the pen down. He looked at the wall. The room was very quiet. An old priest is sitting on a mat in a small fire room in Yazd in the 11th century with a boy of perhaps 11 across from him. The boy is learning a passage of the Avesta by heart, one verse at a time, exactly as a boy learned it from a priest in Istakhr 800 years before. The system has not changed. The system is older than the empire was. The old priest's voice loses strength at the end of each verse. He has been doing this since dawn. The sandalwood is gone. He feeds the fire with tamarisk. He looks at the boy and wonders, without saying it, whether the chain ends in this room or in another like it within a generation. 2 centuries later, in 1258, the Mongol army of Hulagu Khan crosses the Iranian plateau. In a town near Tabriz, a Mobed who has spent his life feeding a small fire walks out of his temple before the army arrives, locks the door, and walks away. He does not look back. The fire, untended, dies that night. There is no bell ringing in the empty room. 300 years after that, in the 16th century, Portuguese ships put in at the ports of Diu and Surat on the western coast of India. The merchants take notes. They notice a community of men in white robes with cloth masks across their faces, tending temples where a flame burns without going out. The Portuguese have no idea what they are looking at. They write in their diaries, "A strange pagan sect." They do not connect what they are seeing to the Magi of the Gospel of Matthew, who came from the East bearing gifts. They do not connect it to anything in their classical education. The intellectual memory of what Zoroastrianism was has been gone from Europe for so long that they cannot recognize it standing in front of them. 200 years after that, in the autumn of 1742, a small procession is moving along a dirt road in Gujarat. 8 men are walking. They are dressed in white from head to foot. The man at the center is carrying a sealed copper vessel, wrapped in thick leather, with an opening covered in a cloth that filters the smoke, but lets the flame breathe. He carries it with both hands, away from his body. The other men around him are guarding it. Inside the vessel is a fire. The fire, the men carrying it would say, has been carried before. It came to a port called Sanjan in a small group of boats in the 8th century. It was hidden in the caves of Bahrat when Sanjan was sacked by a Muslim army in 1393. It was carried to Banzda in 1419. It was carried to Navsari. Today it is being carried to a fishing village on the coast called Udvada, where, the men hope, it will not need to move again. The procession is not announced. The villagers along the road notice it pass and look away. The journey ends in the evening. The vessel is opened inside a small marble room that has been prepared. The fire is set on an altar of stone on a bed of ash that has been brought from the previous home. A bell is rung once. The sound carries through the marble and dies. A priest is kneeling on wet sand on a beach in Gujarat, sometime in the 8th century, on a morning when the monsoon is close enough to smell. Behind him, 7 small boats have been pulled up onto the sand. His name, in the tradition his community preserved in verse, is Nairyo Sang Daval. In front of him, 8 other priests in white stand in a circle around a sealed copper vessel. The vessel has been with them for months, across the Arabian Sea from Hormuz, overland before that from Khorasan. Inside it, by the tradition the community carries, are embers taken from one of the fire temples of the old empire. A small aperture covered with cloth filters the smoke, but lets the flame draw breath. The embers have not been allowed to go out. Behind the priests, the rest of the migrants are sitting in small groups. Exhausted, they are looking at palm trees they have never seen. The wind is wrong, the birds are wrong, the light is wrong. The community preserved the story of their arrival in a long poem written down in 1599 called the Qissa-i Sanjan. The exact year was debated for centuries. The shape of the story was not. By the Qissa, the local king, Jadi Rana, set conditions before allowing them to stay. They would take Gujarati as their everyday language. The women would dress in saris. The men would lay down their weapons. They would explain in plain terms what their religion was. The king sent a cup of milk filled to the brim. There is no room here for more. The priest added a spoonful of sugar without spilling a drop. We will sweeten what is yours. We will not overflow it. The story has the polish of myth, the shape that they were taken in, that they kept their fire, that they learned the language of those who had taken them in, is real. Within a few years, they will consecrate the fire in a temple at Sanjan. The fire is given a name. The name is Iransha. It means King of Iran. The king they had lost is buried in a province nobody in Ctesiphonte cared about. The new king of their nation is a flame in a cup on a beach in Gujarat. A young priest, perhaps 20 years old, is sitting cross-legged on a palm fiber mat in a small room in Surat around the year 1700. He is an ervad, a priest in training. The light comes from the open courtyard door behind him. On the low table in front of him is a manuscript on vellum, at least 500 years old. The text is in 2 languages, side by side. On the upper line, the right-leaning script of Avestan, a passage of the Vendidad. In the sacred tongue, nobody has spoken on the street since before the empire fell. On the lower line, in Pahlavi, a gloss made centuries ago by priests who themselves no longer spoke Avestan as a living language. Beside the old manuscript is a new sheet of paper, a fresh reed pen, an inkwell. The young priest has a small piece of sandalwood in his mouth, a ritual purification kept there so no impure breath passes over the sacred text. He is copying the Avestan, character by character. He is not translating. He is not interpreting. He is reproducing the exact form. He has been trained for this work for 10 years. Copying is not understanding. He knows what most of the passage means. He learned the gloss from his teacher, who learned it from his, but he is here for the form. He is here so that someone in a century he will never see can still read what was said. 20-some years later, a manuscript like the one in front of him will reach the Bodleian Library at Oxford, a gift from English merchants in contact with Parsi families. For the first time in 1,000 years, a European library will hold a complete Avestan text. In 1754, a 23-year-old Frenchman named Abraham Hyacinthe Anquetil Duperron will see 4 facsimile pages from that manuscript in Paris. He will decide that day to go to India for the rest. He will arrive in Surat in 1758. He will spend 3 years there, learning Avestan through Pahlavi, Pahlavi through Persian. A few priests will teach him. He will leave Surat in 1761 with 180 manuscripts. In 1771, in Paris, he will publish the Zend Avesta in 3 volumes, the first translation of Zoroaster's text in any European language since late antiquity. The copyist in Surat will not know any of this. Anquetil will never know the copyist's name. The chain is held by people who do not see the next link. A priest in white stands in a small room of white marble. He has been awake since the 3rd hour before dawn. The reader has been here before. The room is in a fishing village on the coast of Gujarat, 3 hours north of Bombay, called Udvada. The temple is the Iransha Atash Behram. The fire on the altar of stone on a bed of undisturbed ash is the fire that arrived at Sanjan in a sealed copper vessel sometime in the 8th century. It was hidden in the caves of Bahrat in 1393, carried to Bansta in 1419, to Navsari, and finally to this room in the autumn of 1742. By the tradition the community has carried for 1,300 years, this is the same flame. The priest is one of 9 hereditary families that have fed it. His grandfather stood in this room. His grandfather's grandfather stood in this room. He has been training for the work since he was 7. He learned the boy by listening to it 5 times a day for every day of his childhood, until the verses sat in his body the way they sat in the body of a boy in Ardashir, 17 centuries before. He lifts the silver tongs. He picks up a piece of sandalwood, 45 centimeters long, from the pile. He places it on the fire. He picks up another, 9 pieces in a sequence that has not changed. The padan covers his mouth and nose. The smoke rises straight up into a vent cut into the marble above the altar. He rings the bronze bell once. The sound carries through the marble and dies. Outside the village, there are roughly 60,000 Zoroastrians left in the world. About 50,000 in India, 5,000 in Iran, where they call themselves Zartoshti. The numbers decline every year. The community is conscious of its own ending and has been for a long time. It feeds the fire anyway. The priest bows briefly to the altar and steps back. There will be another boy in 3 hours. The empire that put this fire in the world fell in 3 generations. Its libraries went, its kings went, its language thinned into another, its stone in the end needed readers it could not find. The fire is still here. It is here because when everything the Sasanians had prepared to carry, their memory failed. A few hundred people made it onto 7 small boats with a copper vessel between them. They were not the appointed successors. Nobody had named them. They simply went. The chain is held by people who do not see the next link. The Sasanian Empire lasted 427 years. By the measures it would have used to assess itself, it was the most prepared civilization in the ancient world. It had a state. It had an official religion with a sacred text and a hereditary priesthood. It had fire temples in every major city, with mobeds appointed by birth to feed them. It had decrees and inscriptions cut into living rock in 3 languages, so that whoever lived after the empire would still be able to read the empire. It had an academy in Gundashapur that took in the philosophy of 3 civilizations and put it into Pahlavi. It had armies that fought Rome and Byzantium to a draw for 4 centuries. Each layer was meant to back up the others. If the state weakened, the religion would hold. If the religion thinned, the texts would hold. If the texts were lost, the priesthood would remember. If the priesthood diminished, the stone would still speak. Redundancy upon redundancy upon redundancy. The Sasanians were right about the engineering and wrong about something deeper. They assumed the layers were independent. They were not. The mobeds were appointed officers of the state. When the state went, the appointments went. The fire temples were funded from the treasury. When the treasury went, the fuel went. The texts were guarded by the priesthood. When the priesthood thinned, the texts thinned with them. The stone was waiting for readers, and the readers were being trained by a system that was also failing. When the Arabs crossed the frontier in 633, all of it was one machine, and the machine had a single off switch, which was the state itself. Within 80 years, the state was gone. Within 200, the priesthood was a fraction. Within 400, most of the Atash Barams were dark. What survived did not survive through the system. It survived past it. A man named Ferdowsi, in a town called Tus, in a region that had been Sasanian and was now Ghaznavid Turkish, spent 33 years on a poem he was not paid for, in a language he chose because it was being lost. He died poor. His daughter sent the late payment back. A few hundred people, sometime in the 8th century, made it onto 7 boats with a copper vessel between them and crossed an ocean. They asked a king for shelter. They were given conditions. They accepted the conditions. They kept the fire. A young copyist in Surat, around the year 1700, copied a manuscript he did not entirely understand, because copying was what his teacher had taught him and what his teacher's teacher had taught him. A 23-year-old in Paris in 1754 saw 4 pages and got on a ship. None of them was the appointed carrier. The appointed carriers had been the kings, the mobeds, the state. The actual carriers were a poet under a foreign sultan, a diaspora on a beach, an apprentice with sandalwood in his mouth, a young Frenchman with a stipend. The question that hangs in the room at Udvada, whether the flame today is materially the same flame that was consecrated in 721, whether the atoms are the atoms, whether matter survives the centuries as matter, is a question the community does not need to answer. The atoms are almost certainly different. The sandalwood is from this year. The bell is the bell that was cast for this room. What is the same is the gesture, the hand, the tongs, the bow, the verse, the sequence of 9 pieces, the bell ringing once and dying. A civilization that prepared everything lost, everything it had prepared. What was carried through was carried by people the empire would not have chosen. The thread held. Watch the priest in the small white room. The empire that put him there is gone. The fire is not. The Sasanians made a bet. They bet on the state. They built the most elaborate machine of memory the ancient world had seen, and they tied every piece of it to the empire itself. When the empire fell, the machine fell with it. What survived by accident, by improvisation, by a few people who happened to be in the right place with the right cargo. 100 miles to the north of the Sasanian capital, in the same century that Ardashir was sitting for his portrait, another people was beginning to make the opposite bet. They were smaller, they had no empire to lose, and they seemed to understand very early that they would have to live without one. In the year 405, a monk in their highlands sat down and drew an alphabet. In 451, on a plain called Ardashir, the Sasanians won a battle against them. It made no difference. The people had already, 46 years before the battle, figured out how to survive without needing to win. The monk's name was Mesrop-Mashtats. Subscribe to The Long Thread. The next civilization is being prepared. Every empire ends. The thread does not.